Hey folks, it's my pleasure today to bring you one of my heroes. Uh, he's my aquascaping hero. I love his cinematography. I love his aquascaping. I love his accent. He's always been just incredibly nice to me, both online and in person. And I don't know, I think he's a real genuine guy, and I can't wait to introduce you to George Farmer. Hello, George. Thanks so much for joining us today. We've got a couple of
You're welcome.
questions.
Thanks for having me.
So, have you've said before that the best thing for a new aquarist to do is practice? What are some ways to practice and do that sort of thing without actually starting a new aquarium up?
You can practice with aquascaping in particular. I mean, you can practice in an empty aquarium or even an empty container. You can use natural materials that you can collect outside and arrange, sticks and stones and moss that you can forage. And yeah, just play around. I mean, hardscape in particular is a great thing that you can experiment with without costing any money and without getting your hands wet. But you can still practice composition. You can practice, the use of different materials and how they work together. And yeah, that's probably the easiest way to do that without actually investing anything financially.
The stores in town, at least one of the our local stores in town, has finally put in a sandbox where you
Yay!
can go in there and kind of place things and move it around and practice. Look at your things that you're about to buy because hardscape
Yeah,
materials aren't cheap.
exactly. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I'd recommend. In my view, there's no reason why any aquarium store, can't create some sort of sandbox or escaping dojo. And yeah, it just encourages the customer to have a play, and hopefully encourages the retailers themselves to maybe up their own game if they're not that experienced with hardscaping and aquascaping in general. And that's it's one of my kind of pet peeves is the lack of decent displays in aquascaping stores. Because I think it's really important to inspire customers. You can't, a customer is not going to be inspired by walking into a store and seeing, an algae filled aquarium or having no display whatsoever. So you need to inspire them in person. Everyone can be inspired by reading a book, a magazine, or going on the internet, but it's not until you actually see a decent aquascape, a decent healthy part of the aquarium that you can actually, uh, understand what's achievable. Yeah. So, yeah, that's been one of my kind of missions is to get more stores to have decent scapes, decent display scapes. And there's no excuse not to have them. They've got all the materials to hand. If they haven't, then they should have. And yeah, they should take responsibility for being that inspiration for the customer.
if they're going to include that as a product that they sell, then
Mm.
retailers for years have found value in displaying things properly. That in a
Mm.
way that gives you the drive to want to experiment and look at something, especially if it's never been something that's a big deal to you. I don't know what the reaction to your friends and family, kind of outside of the hobby, is, but when I tell them that, oh yes, I bought $130 worth of rocks. They'll be arriving in the mail, and the shipping was as much as the rocks were.
Yeah.
They're just like,
Yeah. Yeah, you pay what for rocks that you can just find wherever, but these are special rocks. They've got character, they've got texture, and it's like any hobby though, isn't it? You can spend a lot of money on any hobby, and it depends on how passionate you are about it, and obviously how much financial capacity you've got to invest.
I think what happens is that because rocks and wood are things that you perceive as free,
Mm,
things that you could just pick
yeah,
up out of the woods and use. I think it changes people's. Unless you want, like, if you're an aquascaper, you're an artist, and just like
mm,
someone that has a particular type of paint that they like to work with, or a particular type
yeah,
of photographic medium, or a lens, or whatever analogy you want to put on it, it you
yeah,
do we do have a very particular type of look that we're going for a lot of times with these things,
mm,
and they can't be So you don't just pick up a rock out of the woods. It's you want a certain texture to it, a certain color to it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's loads of analogies, isn't there? I mean, it looks like you're a musician, judging by your background,
I'd like to be. I like to buy guitars and hang them on the wall.
But you can spend $5 on a guitar, or you can spend $5 million on a guitar. It's all about what your passion is and how much you want that thing.
Very true.
Yeah.
So you transitioned directly from the military to full-time aquascaper. Do you think
it wasn't a direct transition? Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, go ahead.
So I was side hustling as an aquascaper whilst I was in the Air Force. So yeah, I started writing for a practical fish keeping magazine in 2006. I'd only been in the hobby 3 years, in fact. And yeah, I became super obsessed with aquascaping, and any spare time I had out of the Air Force, I spent learning and practicing aquascaping. And then gradually, up until the year 2012, 13, I went on a bomb disposal tour in Afghanistan, and I got blown up. And that was a game changer. I realised that this wasn't for me long term. I didn't really enjoy conflict. I never have done. And at that time in my life as well, I was going through separation from my ex-wife, and that gave me the opportunity to hit the reset button and actually, pursue a career that I was absolutely passionate about. And the Air Force wasn't that. So, I live and breathe aquascaping. I always have done since I discovered it, and it just made sense to take that full-time role. But even then, it wasn't as a full-time self-employed aquascaper. I started off working full-time with a well-known UK company called Tropical Marine Centre as their AquaGrow brand manager, which was their aquascaping line. And then that didn't kind of work out very well. I didn't really enjoy working in that kind of environment. Lots of reasons. But it taught me some really good lessons and good experiences about the industry and the retail sector in particular. And yeah, long story short, I decided, well, I'm just going to go full-time self-employed and just work with brands that I know and love. And yeah, that's it really in a nutshell. And started taking YouTube seriously and build up a network around the world with different folk like yourself, different aquascapers, different people in the industry. And yeah, fast forward to 2020, I'm here right now chatting to you, Sean.
So, Mike, it is so difficult. People say follow your dreams, and in fact, at the end of every video, I say follow your bliss. And I feel like I spent a lot of time trying to live up to my own motto. But were you always disciplined enough to do that, or do you think your time in the military gave you the discipline that you needed to really drive forward with your career and what you wanted to do in life?
Wow, that's a really good question. I've never been asked that one before. I'm going to have time to think about that.
Okay.
I come from a very kind of strict military background, actually. My father was in the army, and he was quite a high-ranking guy, a very kind of Victorian-style guy, and super strict on everything. And then I got sent to military boarding school, and then I joined the military. So yeah, I guess it was kind of I guess I was conditioned to be disciplined. So I guess that did have a very a big influence in my role now. As an aquascaper, attention to detail, getting up early in the morning. Physical fitness. And I take, in fact, the last 2 years, I've taken my mental health very seriously, and just focus on wellness and physically and mentally. And actually, that I think is the biggest game changer in terms of my career now. Is actually really focusing on kind of looking after myself, because that enables me then to execute what I'm really passionate about to the best of my ability.
So, what does the day in the life of a full-time aquascaper look like?
Well, this year it's been very different, obviously, for But at the moment, it's quite regular because of COVID. I'm not travelling so much, so at the moment, I work pretty much half of my time is working for Tropica, Tropica Aquarium Plants. I produce almost every week 2 videos per week for their YouTube channel. So as you know, as a YouTuber yourself, that's a lot of work to create 2 videos a week. And I'm also a global WCC brand ambassador, so that takes up a good amount of time as well. And then I have 5 or 6 aquascapes at home that obviously require maintaining. And I'm quite active on social media, and I spend a fair amount of time on Instagram and Facebook in terms of creating content, but also consuming content. 'Cause for me, I'm still a passionate hobbyist, and I'm fascinated by the community and the trends, and I like to see the direction aquascaping is going. So I spend a fair amount of time on that. I also spent a lot of early part of this year finishing my book, and my wife and I have also started a podcast. So yeah, my days are literally from, I want to say, 7 in the morning till 7 in the evening is full on immersed in aquascaping, pretty much. Yeah.
It seems like with a lot of creative professions, the people that do it the best are able to sustain it for a long period of time, really diversify. So you've got your book, you've got your podcast, you've got an alternate YouTube channel, you've got brand ambassadorships and stuff. So it's not any one thing. It's not like you just go to hotels and make aquascapes and stuff. Although, have you done much of that? You've done that, I assume, right?
Yeah. I've done probably around 100 workshops around the world, most for Europe and UK, but a few in America. And I do private installs as well. I've done a few fairly recently before lockdown restrictions became too strict over here. So yeah, I live and breathe it in every respect. And like you say, it's important to have a diverse work basket. And that's important from a financial security point of view, because if any one thing drops out, it's not going to impact you too much. But also in terms of just keeping myself interested in the hobby. If I was just a full-time 100% YouTuber, then I think I'd get burnout. I think I'd get a little bit bored of it, and I think I'd find it more of a chore. Whereas I can now, at the moment, I'm not even on average probably creating not even 1 video a week on my own channel, because obviously my energy is, kind of diverted towards the Tropica. But for me, that's still great. It's not about building my personal brand on YouTube. For me, it's about communicating that message of aquascaping to as many people as far and wide as I can. And I use those different elements of my work basket to help execute that. Like you said, with the book, the podcast, YouTube, still write for magazines, written the book, get interviewed by people like you guys, private installations, public workshops, public seminars, public speaking events. And yeah, I love it all. And I say no one day is the same. At the moment, it's a little bit more regular, but just because of the environment we're in, the lockdown. And I've deliberately taken on extra hours, with the likes of Tropica, because I have that capacity to do that, because I am working from home, and God bless the internet. And
thank God.
Otherwise, I would be absolutely. I wouldn't be here, obviously, talking to you right now physically, but I wouldn't be able to make a career and put a roof over my head if it wasn't for remote working.
So, of the people that that keep aquariums, has the COVID lockdown increased the beauty of all the aquariums that you've come into contact with? I know my aquariums have never looked better because I'm at home.
Exactly, I'm with you on that. Absolutely. It's funny because when coronavirus kicked off, there was a big panic of a couple of companies. We had Tropica and Ariza. We were really worried how it would impact on the industry. But actually, it's actually thriving. There's so many online stores now which can supply goods online, and People are consuming more content, on the various social media platforms, and in this kind of weird environment, indoor hobbies, house plants, any kind of, I think anything that can bring nature indoors has actually kind of been thriving, because people, I don't know about the US, but people are spending a lot more time indoors, and they're investing a lot more time, energy and money in making their indoor spaces more beautiful, whether that's aquascaping or houseplants or terrariums, paludariums, ponds. It's just about this. I think there's an innate desire for humans to be close to nature. If we can't get that by walking in the local woods or in a local river, then we have to bring it into our homes. And I think, in this environment, that's become quite obvious. And it's become obvious for me personally. My gallery has completely transformed during coronavirus, and I've become a little bit obsessed about houseplants, and it's next year I'm planning to do a lot more travelling, so it will be interesting to see the quality of the aquascapes, because I won't be around to maintain them.
Right.
But it's I'm digressing slightly, but there is actually an opportunity. There's a local store near me, Aquarium Gardens. They've got a young guy working there. And if he's watching, his mind will be blown if I mention him live on your video. But there's a young guy there called Tom, and I think he's 17, 18, and he wants to be a full-time aquascaper. And I've only had a couple of minutes conversation with him. But my idea is next year, once the restrictions are lifted a little bit and he's got a driving license, then I actually have an idea to kind of him to be my apprentice. And, I can train him on how to maintain my aquariums. He can maybe shadow me when I do private installs and things like this. So this will, when I do hopefully be able to travel again, I can rest assured that someone will be on hand to look after the tanks.
You said his name's Tom?
Yeah. Tom, yeah.
Tom, you're, wherever you are out there, you're a lucky man.
Sure, you both makes it.
I tell you what, when I got, so I got into aquariums probably 16 or 17 years ago, and we have a bookstore in town called McKay's, and it's used books. So I bought a bunch of books from the 70s and 80s and 90s, and learned about fish mainly from that. YouTube was a thing, but it was not nearly like it is today. And you could go learn specific things. And then for my birthday that year, my wife got me, she was in the aquarium store, and she bought me Mono's book. I don't remember the title of it.
Was it one of the old ones? Nature Aquarium book one?
It had like the bubbles on the front, for the nano tanks or something.
Just 5 seconds.
Okay.
This one?
Yes.
Yeah. This is the book that changed my life. This is the one that got me into aquascaping.
Me too. Yeah. Me too. After that, and it was always aspirational, because I was like, oh, I want to do just this. And then you realize, that's really, really hard. Or maybe I'll use the materials that they use. Well, I need 3 jobs now.
Yeah, exactly. It's not cheap. Yeah.
I think
back in those days, things and resources were limited. Still are limited in some places. To buy a CO2 kit, pressurized CO2. When I started the hobby, there's only 2 places in the whole of the UK that sold them. It is. I think that's a really big lesson. Is actually the availability of decent products, hardscape materials, has a real impact in how people can develop their own hobby. Yeah.
Well, after I got the book,
I'm digressing, mate. So.
No, it's okay. But after I got the book, it gave me. I feel like more than anything, it gave me an appreciation. There are English things in there you can read, and the way he describes. The concepts, the escapes, it really opened my mind to a lot of different things. All I would say is that I have a hard time kind of getting some of the concepts. Like some of it didn't make sense. I I've lived around a lot of graphic designers. My mom is an artist and an art teacher. Like I basically grew up, and my family was like, art, art, art. And then when I got to college, they're like, you'll never make money doing art. Why are you doing that? And I went in for photography, and but I feel like all those skills kind of combine, like the sense of design, a sense of motion and color and stuff. All those things combined into aquascaping in a really fun way. And
I agree.
And his books were the reason I even looked at plants. I was like, oh, they're too hard, and I was like, it didn't matter if they were too hard or not. You know, I just learned about them, and much like keeping fish, keeping plants is its own hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for me, when I first opened that book, I mean, I only had an aquarium for about a year. I think I had an aquarium 6 months to a year before I was given the book for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of always had this strong connection to nature. I always loved being in the woods and by rivers and by the sea. I loved being outdoors and just enjoyed nature. And that's why I wanted an aquarium to start with, and I wanted to plant it. And actually, the first book I ever bought was actually, you've heard of the company Denelay.
Yeah.
They had a product guide, but it also talks about like the 7 steps to success. I think it was, CO2, light, substrate, fertilizers, all these things. And so I read that. So I kind of knew the basic science behind keeping aquarium plants, but I didn't have an insight into like the artistry and that connection with nature. And it wasn't until I opened that book that I realised there's something really clicked. It was like almost like an epiphany. And I realised this is exactly the direction I wanted to take my hobby. And you're right, it ticks so many boxes. Fundamentally is that connection with nature, which for me is the most important thing. But I'm a bit of a techie as well. I'm a bit of a science. I like science. I like the art, but I like design and technology. I actually like the maintenance. I like that disciplinarian thing, which we touched on already. I like to know that I've got a positive impact on something, and I like to have that kind of nurturing thing as well. And then, so you've got that kind of those aspects of the hobby, and then you've got the other creative aspects as well. So you're not only aquascaping and creating a beautiful work of art, but if you're a creator like me and I'm really into photography, and I'm into video and editing, and it's just, there's got to be like 12 separate disciplines at least that aquascaping covers. And you can be, I think in life you can be really, really great at one or two things and be relatively successful. But I think some of the most successful people are actually only good, but they're good at a load of things. And I think that's maybe one of my strengths, is that I'm not the best photographer, I'm not the best aquascaper, I'm not the best public speaker or writer, but I'm okay at all of them. And I think, that's maybe some people can take heart in that, because with contest aquascapes in particular, that's the number one thing that maybe inspires people. But again, it's probably the number one thing that overwhelms people, because they think, I can never create anything that good. And that's why I like my style, because I often use, and it's quite similar to your style, I think, Sean. We use easy plants. We don't go super complex with hardscape. They're all achievable. You follow a certain method, which I talk about a lot in my videos and in articles, etc. And anyone can achieve those results, because we're using, easily available plants, easily available equipment, easily available methodologies and techniques, and anyone can repeat that process and get great results.
I found a lot of the plants I choose are directly tied back to my laziness.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, I've gotten to the point where I really hate stem plants now. Just because
I do.
You turn around and
my plant. Yeah, I don't use stem plants that often. Yeah, I mean, you see these red stem plants here. They're only in there because I've got a contract to do a video on these stem plants. I wouldn't put them in there by choice.
Every aquascape I've got with stem plants seems like it's maintenance. it's time when I really finally have to just deal with it. It's
Yeah.
so much faster than a lot of my tanks. Are just pure Anubias.
Mm.
I had a plant I love, but I'm having a lot of trouble with is Buse, which is supposed
Okay.
to be kind of easy like Anubias, but for
Mm.
some reason I kill it. I kill it so often. Like
Where do you get your beast? Is it healthy to start with when you buy it?
I think so. I mean, it looks healthy when I get it, and I've got them from
Mm.
a number of sources,
Okay.
and not all of them have died. Like I have a nice little a bunch here and there in different tanks, but what's happened to a few of them is they just get covered in blackbeard algae or something like
It's
that.
it's really prone. It's really prone to blackbeard algae, in my experience, and it doesn't like, in my experience, it doesn't like dirty water. I'm not saying your tanks are dirty, but if there's like even a slight build-up in waste organics, then it tends to attract that BBA. I think a harder plant than Anubias. Anubias I find is a lot easier
Oh yeah,
than Boost.
I have no
To get
problem with
a
those.
beauty, yeah, I mean, to get a really thriving, beautiful boost, in my experience, it needs to be in a, really, really clean system. And yeah, it's not the easiest plant to keep looking really good in the long term.
What I'm
Yeah.
doing now is I'm trying to grow them out in a very low stocked tank.
Mm,
So
good
so it's
idea.
low stocking, a lot of cover, but still CO2. So it's got a lot of floating plants, but
Okay.
not CO2. You've used a few floating plants in some of your aquascapes.
Mm.
Do you have a favorite one?
Yeah, I've got some in my discus tank right now. It's a Salvinia auriculata. I think it used to be called Salvinia natans.
Mm-hmm.
And it stays green. The leaves stay quite small. The roots don't dangle down so much. It doesn't have so much impact on the aquascape. Super easy. And I normally use it in most of my aquariums to start off with, and then I gradually take it out over the weeks until the aquariums become super stable. All the other plants are mature enough and robust enough to fight off the algae, and then I'd normally take all the floating plants out. So it's kind of I use it as a helping plant. But it's also nice as an indicator plant because it's so fast growing, because it's near the light and it's got access to the CO2. It grows super fast. But because it grows so fast, it will show up the nutrient deficiencies first. So if it starts to go pale, you need to add more fertilizers. And then the slower growing plants, they're not going to go hungry.
Right. One of the ones that I've discovered recently that I really love is the red root floater.
Yeah, Philanthus fluitans, beautiful plant.
You're so good at that. I cannot remember scientific names of
I'm
plants.
not.
I can't do it. I can't do it. I need some
I
kind
love
of
it.
weird
Then
common
everyone
name.
says, "Oh, you always say it perfect." It's really funny because everyone says, "Oh, George, you always say the scientific names perfectly." Well, I don't even know if I'm saying it perfectly, but I just say it with confidence, and then everyone just thinks thinks they're saying it perfectly.
I
So
think it's the
I could have said
accent
it
too,
completely
George.
wrong.
Anytime a British person tells me something, I assume that they're right because I just something about that accent just makes them seem smarter than us. I don't know what it is.
There's some social conditioning there somewhere. Yeah.
So let's say you're a new person to aquascaping, and and you want to go get some plants. Uh, is there a particular group of plants that you could pick, maybe that would be harder to kill, or do you recommend getting a pack of plants like from a? There's a lot of retailers that have like beginner kits and stuff like that.
Mm.
What kind of things would you look for plants?
Yeah, there's a couple of things to watch out for. So I think the number one thing is make sure the plants are healthy to start with. Because no matter what plant you get, even if it's the easiest plant in the world, if it's not healthy to start with, then you're going to be fighting a losing battle. Especially in a new aquarium setup or a setup that isn't conducive to great plant growth, you're really going to struggle. And that's a real problem because especially if a beginner struggles with a plant and they fail with a plant, then they're going to have a bad experience. They've invested money, they've invested time, and they've not had a good experience. They've had no fun doing it, so they're just probably going to give up on plants. And for me, that's a tragedy. So it's really important that they invest in healthy plants to start with. Now, how they can do that, there's a few ways. Hopefully they can walk into a local retailer and be able to identify if the plants are healthy. There's lots of tips for that. So obvious things are hopefully there's no algae. Sorry, I'm on an American video. So there's no algae on there. There's no pest snails. Look at the leaves. Hopefully there's no pale growth or yellowing growth. Look at the roots. Hopefully they're like a nice bright white colour. They're not translucent or brown. So there's just some like kind of physical signs to look out for. And assuming they're all healthy, then stick with easy plants. Anubias, we talked about, Java fern is a classic. Although a little bit of a caveat with Java fern, it actually does really do better in a higher energy system, especially things like trident fern. It does like a little bit more light than CO2 in my experience. But Anubias, Java fern, Cryptocorini, Crips, these are perfect for beginners. Give them a nutrient-rich substrate. They'll almost grow in the dark. Don't need CO2 injection. You'll probably get some melt, so the plant will adjust to its new conditions, and to do that, it sheds its leaf and generates new leaves. And that can be quite worrisome, especially for a beginner. But don't worry. Hopefully, if you've got a good system, or you just give it some root capsules if you haven't got a decent substrate, and you'll get new growth. So Anubias, Java fern, Crips, mosses. Mosses are quite funny because to actually get a moss to look really super healthy, like you do in some of the photos, it actually needs some, better conditions than people give it credit for. Bucophalandra we've talked about already. That's relatively easy, but again, to make it look pristine, it needs like super clean water, and again, it thrives in higher energy conditions, maybe with a bit of CO2 and a bit more light. But yeah, I mean, if you're willing to take a bit of a gamble, then maybe buy one of these kind of bumper starter packs that you can get from an online retailer. Stick them all in your tank, see what grows well for you, and then you'll know what's going to grow well in the long term. What doesn't grow well, just chuck that out. Make a note. Yeah, they don't do very well in my tank. I'll avoid them in the future. But these plants that do well, like Vallis is another one, especially if you have harder water.
Oh, yeah.
Sagittaria is another easy one. Hygrophilas, Ludwigias, Rotalas, all of these, most of them are relatively easy. So, maybe it is a little bit of a risk going online, but, online reviews or word of mouth, join a community. This is a really good tip. If you can join a local plant club, if it's online or even a physical meeting, I'm not sure what the restrictions are like at the moment. But this is the best way, plant swaps, learning from people with genuine experience, genuine credibility. They're going to give you really good advice. Maybe seek some mentorship, and don't be afraid to reach out online as well. There's some really, really good people out there with a lot of experience that are happy to share their time and energy with you. They're passionate, they're passionate about promoting the hobby. They're passionate about lifting people up and spreading the word. And aquascaping is... and planting aquariums is just something really special, and the vast majority of people in our hobby are lovely people, and they just want to help each other out. So it's never been a better time, in my opinion, in my experience. There's never been a better time to get into the hobby. There's so much great information out there, so many great products. There's another caveat to that.
Yeah,
there's so much information out there that it can be a little bit overwhelming. There's dozens of YouTube channels, some with conflicting advice, dozens of Facebook groups. Everyone's an expert. So, do seek out those people with genuine kind of time in the hobby. Look at their work, look at what they've created, look at the content they're producing. Is it good quality? Do they have a good reputation? And then follow that path. That's my advice to beginners.
I know my first planted tank, and this was a long time ago, but I bought a plant pack from Taiwan or something like that. Just a whole bunch of plants from overseas, and they arrived. I had no idea what any of them were. I had some idea of like, oh, this will probably be taller. I'll put it in the background and stuff.
Yeah.
That tank went on, like I kept that tank for probably 7 or 8 years. And the stuff that lived, the parts of that set that lived are still in all my tanks. Like I just, and that's kind of how I discovered what I can keep and what I can't keep, is just getting kind of a variety of things. So that's where I learned about crypts and how that they will live forever.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it is trial and error, and there is an element of risk, of course, especially when you buy online. But yeah, don't be afraid, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
it's the only way to learn. It's the best way to learn is to make mistakes, and obviously don't repeat those mistakes. Yeah.
Uh, you do a really good job. Let's talk a little bit about YouTube. I've noticed that you
Mm.
do a really good job uh, on both YouTube and Instagram of kind of dealing with, let's just say, people that offer advice. That offer advice sometimes in a kind of a pointy way. You know, not particularly in a polite way, but they'll say you're doing too much of this, or you should really do it this way. And of
Mm.
course, in a written word, uh, you don't have the inflection of the voice or eye-to-eye
Yeah.
contact, and people always come across as harsher. I know as a creator, we have something called negativity bias, where we'll get 1,000 great
Mm.
comments, and then you get one negative one, and it can just kind of mess your whole
Yeah,
day up.
it jumps out at you, doesn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
But I've
Yeah.
watched your interactions, especially recently, like with people giving you advice on your discus tank and stuff about maybe feeding the way you're feeding, or
Mm.
how many you have in there, or all the different things.
Yeah.
And you're always like, "Oh, please elaborate. I'd like to learn." I think that's an amazing attitude. Did it take a while to kind of? How did you come
Yeah.
to? How did you get there? Because I think a lot of people have trouble with that.
It's it's really quite simple. It's like the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. So I know that I've always got things to learn, and you know, some people will know a lot more stuff than I do, and I give them that opportunity to let me know that. And you know, I'll never know it all, and the day I think I do is the day that I'll stop, because there's yeah, it is interesting, and you know, I think most people are sensitive to criticism, but I think if I just kind of put it back on them, if they're giving me a criticism,
Hmm.
and it's kind of fact based, then I'm really happy. I am genuinely happy to learn from them. Often I kind of know already that they're not interested in actually letting me learn anything. You know, a lot of people are literally out there for negativity,
Right.
and I kind of get a sense of that. But I get at least giving them the opportunity and the platform to educate me. And if they don't, then that's it. Then it's just a line drawn underneath it, and then I can move on. It's as simple as that. And yeah, you know, I am quite sensitive. You know, I'm a sensitive British guy. You know, and but I try to just use that as I use that sensitivity. Hopefully to my advantage, and genuinely try to learn from folk. And
I
even if there's not actual hard facts to learn from, but at least I've learned from dealing with that person. So I just try to see things in that kind of positive growth mindset way, and don't have that fixed mindset of, yeah, I'm doing it my way, it's the best way, because often there's always room for improvement.
I spent a lot of time this year experimenting with other people's techniques,
Okay.
um, versus just stuff that I've read and then kind of assembled on my own. And
Mm.
it's funny because people get almost this tribal mentality,
Mm.
for one technique or another technique, and it becomes just this like it's the only way to go. Whereas
Mm.
in fact, there's dozens of ways to approach, uh, you know, how you put your substrate in, or
Mm.
what's better to grow plants and stuff. Now I know
Yeah.
there's hard science behind a number of these things, but um, I think it's really important if you're a beginning aquascaper and you're starting to want to share your work online, or that's kind of an inevitable thing these days, is to put your stuff on social media. If you
Yeah.
start getting picked apart, approach it like George does. Say, well, oh, that's really interesting. Can you tell me more about it? And if they're a
Mm.
bully, they'll just go away. And if
Yeah.
they're serious, maybe they'll
let me
teach
know.
you something, you know. So
Yeah, exactly. And I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot of stuff from people
I
that
have too.
have initially come across as a troll, and actually, and like you said right at the beginning of this kind of thread, they come across as a troll because of the nuances of the written language, and there's no body language or non-verbal communication to give you the cues that actually they're genuinely trying to help.
Right.
But because you just see the negative and you just think they're being critical for critical sake. But actually, once you engage with them and have a genuine conversation, then you can actually learn a lot and learn a lot from each other. And actually, friendships have developed this way. So yeah, don't give the troll a chance. If it's a troll, give them a chance. If they'll fail at the first hurdle, and then you can block them or you just ignore them or whatever you want to do. But quite often you'll find some genuinely good advice from some folk.
There are friendly trolls, is the tip in the moral to the story.
Yeah, exactly. Trolls need love as well.
That's right.
That's why they're a troll, because they haven't had enough love, basically.
Yeah, that's right. Naughty trolls need love too. Okay, so you've spoken about the therapeutic. You've spoken. Let's try and get the marbles out of my mouth for a second. You've spoken about the therapeutic nature of tanks. Is the therapy better experienced in the viewing or the maintenance for you?
For me personally, that's a really good one. Yeah, is it in the consumption or the creation or the maintenance? I think it's everything. For me, actually, I get my biggest kind of sense of satisfaction from knowing that I've helped other people with aquascaping. And for me, that's my own therapy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've had emails from folk that have literally said aquascaping has saved their life. And, there's nothing bigger than that, is there? So that's a really beautiful side of the hobby. For me personally, there's a few things that I like better than just sitting down with my wife. We've got a lovely couch opposite the discus tank there, and we'll just sit there and we'll have a chat, and we'll just look at the tank together, sometimes in silence, and it's just taking yourself out of your own head sometimes. You're actually just consuming a slice of nature, and that is super powerful. And yeah, that's really therapeutic and mindful. And you can use that mindfulness aspect in almost every part of aquascaping, whether it's preparing plants to create the aquascape, whether it's the maintenance process, whether it's just waiting for that perfect shot with your camera as the fish comes past. You just learn patience and delayed gratification and all these kind of really enriching parts, to this therapeutic side. There's so many, and that's one of the reasons that I dearly love aquascaping so much. So that's a great question, and yeah, I think people underrate the potential therapeutic aspect of aquascaping.
A lot of people have, in a friendly way, have given me a hard time about how many aquariums I have. Right now I have about 15 aquariums. And not all of them are maintained probably to the standard I should, because there's just so many.
Yeah. You've only got so much energy.
Yeah. Well, now it went from all of them in one day, which I do occasionally to, I have an upstairs day and a downstairs day.
Okay, that's a good idea.
My 210 in particular takes about an hour longer to do than the other tanks, just for the time to refill it and the sheer volume of things to go wrong or to correct, to steer in the right direction. But I put on a podcast or some music, and I do that, and I always feel better. And not only when I'm done, and an hour later after the dust settles and the water's all clean and the glass is all clear, I'm just like, oh, I'm at peace. So but the act of taking care of them and going through and changing things around or trimming the plants where they need it, or moving a fish, or all those little things that you do, um, it gives your brain a chance, I feel like, to unwind and sort
Mm.
of, and it's almost like you're, I don't know how to put this, like not cleaning your life, but you're kind of bringing order to some
Mm.
part of your life. That, like, life is a thing that, especially people like myself and maybe you, uh, I seek control,
Mm.
some sense of control, and
Mm-hmm.
when I can make my tank look nice at will,
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
know that I've done some good, I've accomplished something, it
Absolutely.
I feel
Yeah.
better.
Absolutely. I think it's to do with intention. I think it's to do with approaching something with intention rather than just passively letting life kind of go by. You're actually, like you say, you're taking like a proactive role in it, and whether that's cleaning an aquarium or whatever, if doing something with like focus and intention and having a good result after that, that just gives you purpose, I think. Yeah, and purpose is another story,
Yeah.
but yeah, I agree. That the actual physical witnessing of something transforming from something relatively ugly, maybe if the glass is dirty or the plants have got algae, sorry. Um,
Either way, it's
you
fine.
know, yeah, you've improved that. You get a sense of well-being, you get a sense of accomplishment from that, and a sense of purpose. At a fundamental level, my purpose at that time and point is to make that aquarium look better, and I've done that, and now I feel good because the livestock lives probably improved because you've refreshened the water. You've cleaned the filter, you've cleaned the CO2 diffuser, or whatever aspect of maintenance that you've done, you've improved that thing, and you've improved the viewing experience of it. You've got that sense of positivity, and yeah, it's just yeah, absolutely. I'm completely with you on that, on the therapeutic slash taking control of something. And I'll tell you what, this is a really interesting thing is when I've spoken to quite a few aquascapers about this. When they're feeling really low, they don't actually have they don't feel they want to do the maintenance, and then the tank looks worse, and you feel worse about yourself, and it's a vicious cycle. So what I would suggest to people is, if you have aquariums and you're feeling low and you can't be bothered, don't feel like you've got the energy, just really get some, willpower, some grit, and just do that maintenance. And even if it's just a water change or cleaning the glass, just a simple act of that will make you feel better. And that's the first step in actually improving not just the aquarium, but your mood, and then that positive cycle will get reinforced, and then you'll think, oh, I've made that aquarium look good. If you've got like 3 or 4 aquariums, I'll move on to the next one, make that look good, and you'll feel better, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, maybe don't tackle them all in one day. Pick the easy
Yeah,
one. Pick the
yeah,
easy one and start there, and just kind of build that positive energy, that positive momentum to go
yeah.
towards.
Because it can be overwhelming, can't it?
Yeah,
If you've got 15 aquariums and they're all looking crappy, that is overwhelming. But just tackle one at a time, and then go from there.
I seem to always have one that's just like I'm going to rescape you if you don't. You've got
Shall
3
I?
more weeks.
Shall
I
I give you
filled the
a? Shall I
entire
give you?
top of the tank with floating plants. You got 3 more weeks for that algae to disappear, and or you're rescaped, and that's it.
I want to show you. I want to show you something just to show that all my tanks don't look good all the time. This is an exclusive for the viewers because I deliberately don't show this tank because it
Okay.
is looking crap right now. But I'm going to show you, and I'm going to rescape this, just like we were just talking about. So, can you see? Can you see the algae in there?
Yes.
Can you see the evaporation and yeah? So all my tanks. Yeah, they don't all look good all the time. So yeah, no one's perfect. Let me just switch the camera back on. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a 10-gallon tank that I don't think has ever looked good, and I really need to just re-examine my approach with the whole thing. And I found on my channel too. I've done a number of videos where I just go ahead and show the tank at its worst, and then fix it, and then say, here's
Yeah.
where I got. Just to show people that you don't, I think a lot of people, like, if it gets really super bad, they kind of give up.
Mm.
My Megaflex, which was a really expensive tank for me, it's one of the few tanks that wasn't sponsored
Mm-hmm.
by Fluval. I just had to have it, so I bought it myself. They gave me an extra light for it, but that was about it. But I got it all planted with plants from my other tanks and stuff, and it's going great. And then suddenly, it was covered in algae, and it was just, I mean, it was nightmare. It was like nightmare mode, covered in algae, and had all these issues. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to lose all these plants. Like I had like I had grown all the plants, and that was so it was free kind of to set up, but I could never afford to buy that amount of plants.
Mm.
And so, but a few extra water changes, some adjustments to the lights, and the addition of 6 Siamese algae eaters and a couple of other things that eat algae a lot, and it was gone
Yeah.
in a matter of a couple of weeks. And
Mm.
but you can
Yeah.
recover. You can recover.
You can recover, and I think it's great that if you publicly show that, I think that's really encouraging for the viewers, for the people that are consuming your content. And my plan is exactly that with this little aquacube is, I'm going to show it what it looks like now. I mean, the algae is pearling more than the plants. There's more algae in there than real plants. And yeah, when you let things go, they go, they look horrible, but this is what you can do to remedy it. And I think that's an important lesson for people to know, because I think in the age of social media, Instagram, that comparison culture and people kind of curating just the perfect content all the time, it's really easy for beginners to get a little bit, it's kind of a dysmorphic view of things. And, people very rarely put pictures of crappy algae-filled tanks on because, they don't want to let people know that they've kind of failed. But I think that's important to show that sometimes.
I think that might be my new direction in 2021. Is just all my tanks looking their worst. That'll be my new niche that I do.
Yeah, get a new channel with the rubbish aquarium channel.
Algaescape. Maybe I can start a trend and people will follow me. A whole new tribe of just algae-only aquascapes.
I say you've ever kept saltwater.
My daughter worked at a fish store for a couple of years, and her coworkers talked her into getting a saltwater tank. And then I asked Fluval, and they do you say, this is a little off topic, but do you say Fluval or Fluval?
I say fluval.
Fluval. Okay. Like
Fluval.
Neither of those.
Fluval.
So, okay. I always wondered what the correct way to say it was, because I always said Fluval, and then I watched their videos, and the guy says Fluval. So I always wondered I was like, man, have I been saying it wrong for 10 years? But anyway, so I wrote them. They sent me their little saltwater spec tank, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
And so we set it up, but she had a heater malfunction. It did okay. We had some ups and downs. That's another one where every video that I made about it, I was getting lots and lots of advice. And I was just like, advice. And I was just like, you know what? This isn't my aquarium. This is kind of her journey, and I'm just kind of bringing her in. Like, I told her when she got it, is like, I'm not doing water changes on it. I'm not trying to figure out things when they go wrong. We'll get on it and talk about it and stuff, and we'll kind of share the experience. But this is your tank, She had a heater malfunction, and it killed everything in it. And she was due to move to her dorm for school, like within 2 months. So we didn't set it back up because it was going to be kind of an issue to get it into a dormitory anyway. It's so small in there. And then, a year in school went by, and then she moved into an apartment, and there wasn't really a place to put it in the apartment. Then another year has gone by, and she's about to move again into another apartment. And so the tank's set in the corner of her room empty. all this time, and I really, as much as I appreciated the time that we had, like I think that saltwater creatures are fascinating and so beautiful and so interesting. But I want to take water out of my tap and put it into an aquarium. I don't want to mix it. I don't want to know what the salinity is. I don't want any of that minutia.
Yeah.
I don't want to stress about skimming the water or doing all those things. And I know a lot of people do really simple tanks with salt water and stuff, but I've never been a fish only guy. I'm as passionate about plants as I am about the fish, like equal.
Yeah, me too.
And so I don't feel the drive for it. How about you? Have you gone into the saltwater much?
Yeah, well, this is an interesting topic. I was going to ask you about going to try macroalgae.
Oh, really?
Because this is a plant. And you can do really interesting plant escapes with macroalgae. There's an Instagrammer. I think his name's Dennis. I think his handle is Tiger Boy H2O, and he has some. You know, the UNS, the rimless low ion tanks.
Yeah.
He does some stunning macroalgae escapes in there. And I actually did one over probably 10 years ago. I did it was actually in a Fluval Roma 125, and I converted it into saltwater. It didn't have a skimmer. It just had a regular external canister filter on there. I think I supplemented the supplied lighting with an LED strip, and I just bought some really high quality live rock, which was already cured and mature. Already had loads of critters in it, and then I just stuck about 5 or 6 different species of macroalgae in there, and treated it like an aquascape, like a planted tank. And I was actually dosing fertilizers at one point because the macroalgae was growing so quick. And yeah, that was a really interesting experience, and I'm actually tempted to try it again. Actually, yeah.
You didn't find that getting the salinity right and all that was kind of a hassle?
No, I think I was actually just buying the water pre-mix from my LFS, and I was only doing minimal water changes because the macroalgae is obviously a nutrient export, so there's no need for a skimmer. The filtration is more to do with just circulation, because most of the biological filtration happens in the live rock and via the macroalgae. So it's in every aspect, it's almost just like a regular planted tank.
That's what Kerrigan did too. She was working at the store and she would just buy her water there, pre-mixed, and take it home. And in fact, I still have a few bags of salt that we never ended up using at all, just kind of underneath the aquarium waiting to go. But I don't know. I think I must get at least 3 questions a week asking me about doing saltwater, but I've resisted. I'll take a look at the macroalgae. That sounds neat.
Yeah,
it sounds neat.
I'm not particularly interested in these super colourful corals and super colourful fish. For me, aquariums connect me with nature, and although obviously corals are nature, I think there's something special about the colour green and the natural materials, the wood and the rocks. They're kind of mimic this landscape. That's what the nature aquarium concept's all about, is a transferring this essence of nature from outside into the aquarium. And you don't get that. You don't get that transference with reef, because how often do we spend diving in the coral reefs? Unless you're very lucky to live on a by the Great Barrier Reef, or in a beautiful coastline with some tropical reefs. It's really, but almost anyone has access to landscapes and trees and grass growing on hedgerows, and you can. It's that out bringing right at the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about how important it is to bring nature inside, and for me that's the beauty of a planted tank. And going down that saltwater route, the next best thing is obviously the macroalgae thing.
I think they're fascinating, and I really want to go there at some point, but I'm definitely not in a hurry. I'm especially not in a hurry to talk about it online, because it's such a rabbit hole of information and knowledge that I was fortunate in that I didn't set up my first aquarium and then instantly make a YouTube video about it. I'd been doing aquariums for probably 5 years before I decided I wanted to share my stories on there. So at least I had some knowledge. And that would not be the
yeah, that's fair
case.
enough.
Like, I mean, I think a lot of saltwater principles carry over, freshwater, saltwater. A lot of the principles and bacteria and some of that carry over, but there is a bit more to know. And it's not like this.
Right.
There's more. It's just different.
Different. Yeah, it's very different. Yeah, absolutely.
In your opinion, how has technology changed the aquarium hobby, especially from like a maintenance perspective and making things easier or maybe more difficult than it used to be?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think in terms of planted tanks and aquascaping, I think lighting has come so far in the last sort of 10, 15, 20 years. You know, the prolific nature of LEDs in particular. You can get relatively powerful lighting now for, it's much more affordable. You know, back in my day, you just had to like supplement T8 lighting, get reflectors. I used to squeeze, 4 or 5 T8 fluorescent tubes in a hood, and it was quite tricky to get it to squeeze it all in, and you get that heat generation. But now, with good quality LED lighting, it's relatively affordable, or you can spend as much as you like. You can go super high end. I noticed you've got, is that a Kessel behind you? It's quite a high end unit. You can still get quite powerful. You can go on Amazon and get a floodlight, 20-watt floodlight, 6,500 Kelvin, which will grow your plants absolutely great. It will look great, and it will cost you, $40. So lighting has been a bit of a game changer. Filters haven't really developed that much. I'm a huge fan of the Biomasters with a quick release pre-filter and an inbuilt heater. So just for that maintenance aspect, they've been really helpful for me in recent years. CO2 kits, they've become a lot more accessible. There's a lot more brands now that are producing, relatively good quality CO2 kits. And they're, I think I mentioned earlier, sort of 15, 20 years ago, you could count on one hand how many people, how many places in the UK you could buy CO2 from. And now almost every fish store will sell you a CO2 kit. So just the accessibility and affordability of CO2. And that's been really important for aquascaping, because I'm a big fan of CO2, and I try to use CO2 in most of my aquariums just because I like to get the best kind of plant health that I can. Not to say there's nothing wrong with low-tech tanks and non-CO2 injection. I just like to have that option if I want to grow more demanding plants, or just have that really kind of robust and algae-free growth that I find easier with CO2. Fertilizers, there's some really good quality all-in-one fertilizers now, which include nitrogen and phosphorus. Nitrates and phosphates used to be seen as the enemy of the planted tank, sort of 15 years ago. And now, we realise now that they're actually an essential nutrient for plants, and if we don't have enough of them, the plant gets, nutrient deficiencies and then at least algae. So the accessibility of good quality liquid fertilisers has also been a game changer. And then there's automation as well. I'm still quite old-fashioned. I like to use plug-in timers. I do have, in my Highline aquariums, I have the Oase Highline. They have a easy aquarium controller now where you can control the lighting. They come with a nice LED unit which you can completely control the spectrum and the photo period.
Oh, really?
Which is really useful. Yeah, so my discus tank, the lights are never completely off. So even at night time, they're just on a very, very low light, blue light, like a moonlight. And then they gradually ramp up, they gradually ramp down. So that the photo period is sort of 12 hours, but it's a really gradual thing. So you'll only get sort of 3 hours of peak light, and it just gradually builds up and then goes back down again. And it's actually a much nicer viewing experience, because the tank is never completely in the dark, like I said. And with a plug-in timer and regular lights, it's either on full brightness or off completely, which isn't potentially not great for the fish. Some, especially in open-top tanks, it can startle them and things. So just that kind of advance in controllability with lighting in particular. Substrates as well. There's been a huge increase in availability of soil-based substrates. The original was ADA, Aquasoil Amazonia, and now there's lots of other decent soils out there as well, which will give you a much better chance of success with your plants. They have a beneficial impact on the water chemistry usually. Great home for bacteria, good nutrient content, easy to plant into. They don't need rinsing. So soil substrates is another one. Yeah, so there's a few for you.
Yeah, there's been so many advancements just in the brief period that I've kept fish. I mean, the fish keeping hobby seems like it's many thousands of years old. I mean, if we count the Romans kept fish, the Chinese have kept fish,
the Chinese with the goldfish are like thousands of years old, aren't they? I think, and they were keeping them in like really shallow kind of bowls and stuff. Yeah.
What I think is funny too is sort of the return to that. Like I've recently done some videos for people that have aquariums with no filter whatsoever, like hundreds of aquariums with no filters whatsoever, and they're like pretty great. I mean, for the most part.
Yeah.
And the guy was even talking about doing very few water changes and stuff like that too. It was LRB.
Oh no, LRB,
yeah. Really neat guy. Man, I was walking around his home. He's got all these aquariums on this white carpet, like it was like a polar bear carpet. This white shag carpet, and I was like, how is it so clean?
Yeah, there's only water changes. That's why.
Yeah, there's a reason I don't ever tilt my camera down at a certain angle to look at my carpets, because I've had a few oopsies here and there. But
oh yeah, really nice. Yeah, absolutely.
I've got tile downstairs, so tile is the biggest advancement that's helped aesthetically in my home. But for me, my favorite, back on topic, my favorite technology for aquariums since I've started the hobby is the lights. For me, I don't think I can buy another light that doesn't ramp up and ramp back down. I just love it so much, and I think I see this reaction from the fish when the lights are dim, like that kind of sunrise mode and the sunset mode, that I have never noticed before. Maybe because the lights were out, but they're really active in those kind of like morning and afternoon hours, and I can still see them, and I can really. The other thing is, like, as a planted tank and as a person who battles with algae, daily, the ability to have your tank on for more than 6 hours or so, 6 to 10 hours, I think is about the average for planted tanks.
Agreed.
I've extended mine out, some of them up to like 16 hours almost, where it's nearly the entire day. And the fluval ones will let you do, like, you can add segments. So they've got a sunrise time, but you could add other little segments. So my ramp up is really, really slow. It goes from pretty early in the morning all the way to noon, like noon to 3. It's full power, and then right back down. And so I think it's really natural. It's the kind of thing I always wanted in the lighting from the advent.
I completely agree with you. I used to try and mimic that with. I used to have banks of T8 tubes. Have one come on, and then an hour later another one come on. But it's nowhere near it. Obviously, with LED, it's almost it's almost like an analog curve, isn't it? Rather than doing like a digital thing.
Yeah, like instead of a stepping up, and you can change the color. Changing that color spectrum, you make it really orange in the morning or in the evening and stuff, and it's like I don't know. I just think it's so smart. I think it's a really cool advancement that's hopefully going to be more and more affordable as time goes on, because now they're kind of expensive, some of those lights. But
agreed.
So the Awaze you've switched a lot of your tanks to lidded tanks, and you were talking recently about how you had resisted that for so long. And like I was looking at a tour of like Amano's his museum. Have you been there, by the way?
No, in Japan, the Nature Aquarium Gallery, in Nagita. No, I've not been there yet, unfortunately. I do want to go. I think I was planning on my dear friend Adam Paszkala from Poland. He's a very skilled aquascaper and a huge ADA advocate in the Eastern Europe. He was actually going to pay for me to go with him, bless him, this year. But obviously with COVID, that had to, so that's postponed. But no, I've not been. I have been to the Florestas Abmersas, the largest nature aquarium in the world in Lisbon, in Portugal. And that's just, I don't mind admitting, I actually wept when I went there. It was just so beautiful. And it was just, because it was the last thing he ever created before he died. And, just the impact it had on me on a few levels, but mainly because he introduced me to aquascaping. Without him, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now. And my quality of life, wouldn't be I don't think is anywhere near as high as it is, without him. And to see that the last thing he ever created, and just the physical impact of seeing such a huge, it's 120 feet long, it's like a U shape. So you walk in, you've got the big pane in front of you, but you kind of completely encased. It's like two things running either side, and then a straight thing in front. And then you actually got a composer to make a special piece of music to play on a loop whilst you're in there. And there's no ambient lights at all. It's just literally the lights of the aquarium, and it's just like being in another world. You're just transported into this underwater just spectacle of beauty. No algae in there. The plants are just super healthy. The fish are so healthy. The plants, because it's such a big aquarium, the plants kind of seem to know that they're in a huge aquarium, and they just grow bigger. And that just, even like individual like leaves, which you would think would just stay the same size in any aquarium, they grow bigger. It's just like they know they've got this room to grow, and it just gives you a completely new appreciation for aquascaping, I think.
I think your video of that did a lot of justice. I actually just watched it yesterday.
Oh,
and I thought,
I need to. Yeah, I'd like to do it again because my skills have improved and the technology of the camera and editing has improved considerably. It's a funny story. I've never told anyone this story publicly, but I edited that video in 20 minutes in my hotel room the morning after I filmed it on the way to breakfast with my wife.
Huh.
Yeah, on iMovie on my MacBook. Yeah. And it's my best. It's the best video. Well, it's the most. It's the best. The most viewed video I've ever created. Yeah.
Is it really?
2 million views. Yeah, 2 million views now.
Wow. Yeah. It is. So
I want to go back, and I want to. A few people know this. My plan for next year is to write a new book, and it's going to be the top 50 aquascapes in the world. And I want to travel around the whole world and film and photograph the best aquascapes in all the continents, obviously apart from the Arctic and Antarctic. And yeah, that will be number one. And I want to, get behind the scenes access and talk to some of the team that were involved in creating it and make a kind of documentary about it. And yeah, that's such a cool thing. It gives me goosebumps now just thinking about it. Yeah.
That's in Poland, you said, right?
No, it's in Portugal, in Lisbon.
In Lisbon, okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly where it was.
Yeah, it's actually quite easy to get to from UK. Portugal's, just on the coast of Western Europe, so it's really easy to get to. Yeah.
I'll have to make it out there.
You should go.
That would be
absolutely. You need to go. Yeah. Anyone that's created an aquascape needs to see it. It's like I don't know, what do you call it? The pilgrimage. It's
a trip to the temple.
It's like Mecca. Yeah, it's like Mecca for. Yeah, it's all good.
Green Aqua had done a video at the ADA gallery, and they were talking about being in the temple of the master, and I was like, oh, yeah. I mean, that's where you are when you're there.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think the original point was talking about lidded tanks, wasn't it? Before we got.
Oh yeah, I kind of went off track there, didn't I?
So, well, I did. I think I went off on one as I generally do. That's no problem.
The lids on those.
But yeah, I made the switch. I'm an Oase ambassador, and of course, I'm going to use their products. And so, I was heavily influenced by that. But they didn't actually insist that I use them, and they kind of wanted me to produce a video on setting it up, and that was it. But they said you can do what you like with the tank afterwards. But I thought, they're nice tanks. They're well made. I'm not a huge fan of lidded tanks. I wasn't back then. But back to that kind of growth mindset and being open-minded and trying new things out. The advantages are huge to a lidded tank. No evaporation, no heat loss, no escaping fish and shrimp. And, aesthetically, they're never going to be as good as a rimless tank. But you still have some benefit. This is like a black frame. I've got a black framed moss art above it. You can kind of complement them with your external styling. And I think a lot of aquarium keepers and aquascapers, that's something that they maybe can learn, is actually how to incorporate fully their aquascapes into their living space and make it actually a coherent part of their interior design. And you don't have to have rimless tanks to do that.
Yeah,
So.
I'm a huge advocate of lids, simply from an evaporation perspective. Especially if you're on one of those low maintenance months.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Or you go on a trip or something, and there's a real concern. But also, evaporation causes the water to cool.
Yeah, and it gets harder, and because obviously it's only the pure water that evaporates, and it leaves behind all the minerals. So you're actually going to get an increase in totally dissolved solids, which isn't great for the stability of the water chemistry. So, I live in a hard water area. I mean, my TDS is between 400 and 500.
Oh, really?
And when you just see chalk literally building up around where the water's evaporated. But with lids, you don't get that.
Yeah, even with like this tank behind me, I had a piece of glass cut that just fits most of the aquarium. Like there's a little gap in the back where the Kessel clips on that it doesn't cover, and then I just kind of gently slide it over to feed the fish. I wish, but I just get a glass company to just kind of make them so they fit perfectly on top, and I feel like I cheat and I get kind of the best of it, like.
I was going to say, from here, it looks rimless from here. Yeah, it looks good.
It's got the rimless look. You can still look down into the top of it and stuff, but most of the tanks you get here that are available here, I'm sure you've seen those kind of $1 per gallon tanks with the black rim top and stuff.
Yeah,
I think they really have their purpose. I like the framing. I kind of like on the Oase tanks that I see in the background there. I love the way they do seem framed in there, and they look classy. The white one looks really well. Both of them do. They look really classy compared to like maybe the cheaper ones we get here in the U.S.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. The build quality is very good. They're a German company. These aren't actually made in Germany. The Highline range is more exclusive, but still, they're a good bit of kit. They're solid. And absolutely no complaints. This is the one that I was thinking of converting into macroalgae, but I might actually do Dutch style. Like the formal grouping of plants. But I'm no plans to get rid of them because I really enjoy them. Yeah, they're really cool.
How long? I've always had this question about substrate. How long is it supposed to last? Like, especially like the soil-based substrates. I've seen some things that say that they're only good for about a year, and others saying that they can go for several years.
Yeah, there's a few things to think about with a soil substrate. Okay, so there's the physical integrity of the actual substrate itself. So after some time, they tend to decompose, and those little balls will kind of just slowly convert into like mud. That actually isn't a bad thing necessarily, only if you have kind of ground-dwelling fish, or you're kind of the person that likes to swap plants around or hardscape. You constantly got your hands in there moving stuff around. That's going to present an issue with lifting up a load of detritus and muddy, sludgy substance into the water column. That only tends to happen after, depending on the substrate, actually depends on your water as well, 6 months or so. But that's not, like I say, it's not a problem, and it happens quite gradually. The nutrient content is an interesting one, because that has a huge dependency on a few things. So the more you feed the plant leaves, so the more you use a liquid fertilizer, the less the plant has to rely on taking its nutrients through the roots. So actually you'll get a longer nutrient lasting substrate, soil, if you use liquid fertilizers more regularly. You can also supplement with root capsules or root tabs as well. That's going to prolong the life of the substrate completely. I've ran a soil substrate for 3 years plus with no major issues. I know there's an aquascape we talked about the Nature Aquarium Gallery in Japan. I think it's had the same soil in there for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
So
it can be kind of long-lived.
Only last a year or not. That may be the... Yeah, I mean, it's going to be the mud. It's just going to be like silt, it's... but as long as you don't have sort of, plecos or loaches or corydoras, it's no problem. And actually, the good thing about soils is they have a very high cation exchange capacity. So they actually have the ability to take in nutrients from the water and lock them in to the soil as well. So, that's why when you're dosing a liquid fertilizer, not only are the plants using the nutrients through the leaves, any excess can be taken in through the soil and then make those nutrients available to the plant roots as well.
That's really interesting. I've always wondered about the longevity of it.
There's no fixed answer. It's as long as you want it to be, as long as you're happy to deal with that kind of gradual decomposition. It depends on the brand. Some brands will decompose quicker than others. It seems like the harder your water, this is anecdotal evidence, but it seems like the harder your water, the quicker it will kind of decompose. And I think that's to do with the way it takes in the minerals from the water, because it's got this cation exchange capacity. And then I think it forces it to kind of break down a bit quicker. That is purely anecdotal though, so please don't troll me on
Sure.
that one, the people that are watching this right now.
So I had an opportunity to talk to you a little bit this summer, just chatting back and forth on Messenger and stuff. You were working on your book. You're finishing it up during the summer. Was that kind of your COVID project? Like, I know you've written a lot and stuff, and probably you started it before, the lockdowns and stuff, but did you get...
Yeah, I actually wrote about probably 70-80% of it before lockdown.
Okay.
But my editor, Jason, we've become quite good friends. He was saying, I think you should write this a bit more kind of storytelling, use a bit more anecdotes and things like this. So I just used the opportunity to almost rewrite it from scratch at the beginning of lockdown. And I actually developed a really good habit of waking up early in the morning and then doing sort of 3 or 4 hours deep focused work without any distraction before anyone got out of bed. And my wife's been super supportive. She was kind of running the house, taking the dog for a walk, looking after the kids, doing all that good stuff, and just allowed me to fully focus on finishing the project. So, actually, in that respect, lockdown was a bit of a blessing, because it did actually kind of, gave me the opportunity to fully focus on the book.
So what's the elevator pitch for your book? What will you learn if you read the book?
Yeah, so I'd like to think any man on the street could buy that book, and by the time they've read it, hopefully understood it, they can create a beautiful aquarium, a beautiful aquascape with live plants, and learn how to grow them, learn how to maintain them, and learn how to create a beautiful aquascape. That's the idea. Yeah. It's very beginner friendly. Advanced aquascapers, competition aquascapers are not going to learn very much from it, but that's not my target audience. I'm passionate about encouraging and making aquascaping more accessible to more people. I'm not particularly interested in competing or having the best looking, most complex aquascape. That's not where I get my sense of purpose, my sense of fulfillment from. I get that from lifting up beginners and supporting, people that are relatively new to the hobby that just need that helping hand. Because, from my perspective, the industry has to have new people in it. It has to have beginners. It has to have new hobbyists. And they need to feel that it isn't complex, that it isn't too hard, it isn't too expensive, and it isn't too complicated, and it isn't too overwhelming. And that's pretty much why I wrote the book, is to make it easy, make it accessible, break it down into easy to follow, easy to understand, logical steps. And like I said, by the time they've read it from the beginning to the end, they'll have a very, very good idea on how to create a beautiful aquascape themselves.
That sounds like a wonderful thing, and I know it's your dream to have an aquascape in every home in the world. I think you've mentioned that before, and what a beautiful first step.
Oh, thanks, mate. Yeah, it is, and I genuinely believe it enriches people's lives on so many levels, which we've talked about already. And I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to speak to you and have this platform to communicate that message and to potentially transform people's lives, make their lives better through aquascaping. And it sounds quite romantic and, this kind of grand notion that, every aquascape in every home. But, you've got to dream big, and I don't think there's any harm in that. And then I don't think there's any human being out there which wouldn't appreciate a nice aquascape in their home. Yeah. I think they're just so beautiful, and everyone that comes to my house that have never seen aquascapes before, they're just blown away. There's no one that said, "Oh, I want one of those in my house. I don't like that." Why would I want one of those? They look awful. No one's ever said that.
Yeah, no one's ever looked at my tanks and went, "Oh, yuck." What's funny is I've been embarrassed. I've been embarrassed because like a tank maybe doesn't look as good as it usually does, and someone comes over and I'm like, "Oh, don't look at this," and they're like, "This looks like a museum." What do you mean?
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, but you have that kind of skewed sense of we don't see things through other people's eyes, do we? You see it through obviously our own experiences. But for me, it's just about making it easier for people, and showing them that it isn't super complicated, and just a little bit of time, investing in the right equipment, investing the right amount of time to maintain it, investing in the right plants, and then everyone can achieve a successful aquascape.
Well, George, you've been a real champ. Thank you for hanging out for a long, extended interview. It's been fascinating talking to you, and I really appreciate your time.
I appreciate you interviewing me, Sean, and I really love your work as well. And you're a great guy. We've met in the flesh, and super grateful for this opportunity to speak to you and to all your viewers as well. So thank you.
Thanks for tuning in this week. Next week we've got Chris from Fish for Thought. He's a real cool guy, and I can't wait to introduce you. It's all coming up then, and then I'll see you. Goodbye.